really stepped up. He definitely outplayed Jones, the goalie from San Jose, and they're on to the next round. And I know the St. Louis Blues are going to be playing their song Gloria. They've been playing it nonstop ever since they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. But on a side note, and I hate to rub this in for San Jose fans. This is how terrible or grateful the playoffs can be. So ever since Doug Wilson, the GM of the San Jose Sharks, took over in 2003-2004, the Sharks have played 174 playoff games. You know how many Stanley Cups they have?
I'm gonna guess 0.
Absolutely none, and that's terrible. However, the Pittsburgh Penguins during that same time have played 173 games, and they have 3 cups.
Man,
the playoffs it's brutal. I think total San Jose has 93 playoff wins. Pittsburgh has 90, and they still have 3 cups to San Jose zeros, and it's just it's gut wrenching. It's unfortunate. I mean, but that's playoff hockey, man. I mean, anything can happen.
Yeah, obviously Pittsburgh was able to finish games and finish series. Something that the San Jose Sharks just can't do on that big stage. And
then another thing for St. Louis, at one point in time, they were the last place team in the league. Out of the entire league, they were dead last.
So you're talking this season?
In the regular season, the Blues at one point were in last place, and they actually had a couple fights in a practice when the season just started. But the Blues are the only team in the NHL expansion era, which is 1967 to 68, to go from last place in the standings to finally making it to the Stanley Cup Final.
That is pretty impressive.
You can't be mad about that. It's a great story. So again, hats off to San Jose. They were a great team. They're still strong as ever, and they might have a lot of questions coming in the off season, but again, it shouldn't be a season that they shouldn't be disappointed about.
Little tough to be optimistic.
Yeah,
especially when you're saying they have a lot of kind of things up in the air for the off season. But hey, San Jose always seems to be, if not in the playoffs, right up there. So they'll find a way.
When there's a will, there's a way. They still have a lot of great players on that team. I feel like it's gonna happen eventually, and I believe in that team. But again, the playoffs can be very unforgiving, and I think the best thing I could say for the fans and the players is just to shake it off and just to keep your head up and just keep on pushing.
Oh yeah. Well, let's get into it. Let's talk a little preview of the Boston Bruins and the St. Louis Blues in the Stanley Cup Finals.
All right. I'm so excited for this. There's so many storylines that are going for this. Boston Bruins versus the St. Louis Blues. The first game will obviously be Game 1 at the TD Garden in Boston on Monday. The Boston Bruins, this will be the third time this decade that they've made it to the Stanley Cup Final. They most recently in 2013, where they eventually lost to the Chicago Blackhawks. They did win, however, in 2011 versus it was a 7-game series versus the Vancouver Canucks. They're trying to seek their 7th championship overall. I think they've made it 20 times in the Stanley Cup.
Oh, wow.
But don't quote me on that. I mean, because the Boston Bruins are original 6 team, so they've been there ever since the beginning. The Blues, they started in 1968, 1967, I want to say, and this is the first time the Blues have been back to the Stanley Cup in 49 years. 49 years they've been waiting for a championship.
Man.
Yeah. I don't know if I'll be able to live that long either. But again, as a Red Sox fan, 86 years. But that's a whole nother thing.
Hey, at least you're not a Cubs fan.
What? Go ahead.
I said at least you're not a Cubs fan.
Oh yeah, that must have been brutal for the Cubs. But anyway, the Blues, it's the first time back since 1970. It's the Blues' fourth time in its history. They went in 68 and 69, and the last time the Blues were in the Stanley Cup, they actually faced the Boston Bruins.
Uh-huh. Old rivalry coming back to life.
Oh yeah. So it's gonna be a great rematch. It's a rematch of the 1970 final. For those of you who don't know, Boston won that series 4-0. Obviously, it was all about the famous Bobby Orr overtime diving winning goal. There's a statue of him right outside. That's when the Bobby Orr legend became, an idol to everybody in Boston and the New England area. I'm sure if you look up Bobby Orr, the first thing you're going to see is him in that overtime winning goal as he's getting tripped by the St. Louis player. So this should be a really good series between both these teams. And then we got a few other things that we want to look out for in this Stanley Cup Final. One of which, Davis Backes is facing his old team, the St. Louis Blues, and I think that's going to be a really good storyline.
Okay, so he was trying to look it up. I think he was drafted by the Blues?
Yes, he was drafted by the Blues in the second round. Back in 2003, he spent 10 seasons there in St. Louis, and the last 5 he was actually their captain. And so after a few playoff runs, I think the St. Louis front office thought that we're going to have to do some major changes, and they put him out for free agency, and the Boston Bruins picked him up in 2016. They ended up signing a 5-year, $30 million contract. And I think he's done phenomenal with this team. He's a seasoned vet. He can throw the mitts. He can shoot the puck. He's a grinder. He can be a playmaker. He does a lot for this team. And ever since he came back into the lineup, the Bruins have been 6-0. So they lost to the Columbus Blue Jackets in the second round. And as soon as they put him back in that lineup, I think he makes a huge difference. He works really hard, but then, like I said, he worked his entire, career with St. Louis, and he started off with them, and he's definitely one of those guys that wears his heart on the sleeve, and so it's going to be really hard for him I think it's going to be interesting to see if he can keep his emotions in check, facing all of his old teammates, because half of those teammates that he used to play with, like, they were friends, they hung out, they played together, they traveled together. And we'll see if David could keep his emotions in check.
Yeah, it's always tough to have a good relationship with a lot of guys and have to come in and kind of face him as an enemy.
Yeah, I don't know what he has to be going through right now, but that's just one of the other stories. The other stories that we have is we got 2 of the 3 of the Selke Trophy finalists. Now, if you guys don't know what the Selke Trophy is, it's the Frank J. Selke Trophy. It's basically it's the forward who demonstrates the most skill in a defensive component of the game, which basically means it's the best offensive defensive player, a player that plays all 200 feet of the ice, that doesn't just play defensively, not just offensively, but he plays everywhere that he needs to be. Patrice Bergeron is one of them for the Boston Bruins, and the other one is Ryan O'Reilly. Patrice Bergeron, I think this is his 4th nomination for this award. It's Ryan O'Reilly's first. I'm sure Ryan O'Reilly's really stoked. For those of you who don't know, he played for Buffalo for a long period of time. I think he got traded this year or last year to the St. Louis Blues, and he's having a phenomenal season in the regular season as well as the postseason. So I'm really going to see that lineup together. They're both first liners. I think they're both going to be lined up against one another, and that should be a really good match between those 2 really talented players.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch. See how it unfolds. Obviously those awards won't be given out till after the season, so it'll be interesting to see if this series has a big effect on it.
Oh, without a doubt. The third nominee is Mark Stone from originally the Ottawa Senators, got traded halfway through the season to the Vegas Golden Knights, and he's actually having a phenomenal season. Actually, right now, he's playing in the World Championships for Team Canada, and he's still just as hot. But I think when push comes to shove, it's probably either going to be Patrice Bergeron or Ryan O'Reilly, just for the sake that, they're in the Stanley Cup Final. With that being said, we also got to talk about the goalies now. It's going to be Tuukka Rask versus Jordan Binnington. Like I said, Tuukka Rask has been here twice before. He was the backup goalie in 2011. Tim Thomas was the head, but he was also the starting goalie in 2013 for Boston. Rask has a 1.84 goals against average and a 9.42 save percentage, which is top among goalies in this year's playoffs. The Blues goalie Jordan Binnington, his numbers are not as impressive as Rask's, but it's still pretty darn good for a 25-year-old rookie. He's a finalist for the Calder Trophy this season. But the thing is, his goals against average is 2.36 with a 9.14 save percentage. But the thing is, he still led this team to the Stanley Cup Finals, so it should be a really good matchup to see.
Yeah, always exciting having a rookie playing on such a big stage.
Oh, it's a great story. I mean, he enters the Cup Final allowing 2 goals on 71 shots in 3 games. Like that's pretty impressive. That definitely gets our attention. And he didn't do it on his own. He definitely had a defense in front of him, and he definitely had the offense that helped him out when. So I can't wait to see these two teams go at it, and it's going to be a really fun series. Now, the only questions that I have, I guess, or what I'm worried about, especially as a Boston fan, is how long the 10 days off will affect the Bruins team.
We've been saying it the entire playoffs. For your sake and for the Bruins' sake, I hope it doesn't hurt them like it has the other teams that have come off a sweep. Hopefully at this point in the playoffs, it really has been an opportunity to kind of rest the legs, heal up, that kind of thing, and not necessarily not a thing where they are able to kind of get lethargic, get rusty.
Exactly, but at the same time, I'm thinking as a fan that when you have players, it's months. These guys are going months just playing games back to back, traveling, and just facing teams and giving it 100% each and every night. Eventually, it's gonna wear out. It's gonna wear on you, and I'm hoping, as a fan, as a Boston fan, that you'll have time to rest. As of course, Zdeno Chara was dealing with an injury the last part of the last series. But I think this 10-day race will give them some time. But on that same note, like we've been saying this whole time, the New York Islanders had 9 full days off after sweeping the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round. They didn't win another game. They got swept by Carolina. The Blue Jackets had 8 full days off after sweeping the President's Trophy Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round. They lost Game 1 to the Bruins in overtime, rebounded in Games 2 and 3, but lost 3 in a row to end up losing the series. The Hurricanes had 5 full days off sweeping the Islanders. The Bruins swept them. The Blues, it should be noted, they'll also have 5 days off before Game 1, but they didn't sweep. Boston did. So statistically, this playoffs, it doesn't look good for Boston statistically wise.
Well, hey, there's statistics, and like you said, there's playoff hockey, and as long as the Bruins show up to play, I got no doubt that they can get things done. Yeah,
I think there's a couple keys to each team if they want to win the whole thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
If the Blues want to win the Stanley Cup, they have to score for us like they've been doing. They remind me of a lot of the Vegas Golden Knights last year. They always scored within the first 5-10 minutes, and if they want to win, they don't they can't play from behind. They always have to score first. They always have to get on the board first, get that momentum going, make the other team play their game, and then